In the heart of a bustling city stood St. Mary's Hospital, a place where lives intertwined in unexpected ways. Emily Carter had been working there for nearly 5 years, earning a reputation as one of the most compassionate and dedicated nurses on staff. Her colleagues admired her ability to make even the toughest patients feel comfortable. Whether it was calming an anxious child or soothing an elderly patient, Emily had a gift for connecting with people. But little did she know that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. One chilly morning, a new patient arrived at the hospital. He was brought in after a severe car accident that left him unconscious. The doctors diagnosed him as being in a coma, unsure if he would ever wake up. His identity remained a mystery because his belongings had been destroyed in the crash. With no wallet, phone, or identification tags, the hospital staff simply referred to him as John Doe. Despite his unknown background, Emily felt drawn to this mysterious man from the moment she saw him lying motionless in the bed. Emily was assigned to care for him alongside other nurses, but something about him made her linger longer than necessary during her shifts. His face was calm, almost peaceful despite the tubes and wires surrounding him. She noticed the faint stubble on his jawline, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the edges, and the faint scar above his eyebrow, details that hinted at a life full of stories waiting to be told. Unlike many patients who came and went, this man seemed different. There was an aura of quiet strength about him, even in his unresponsive state. As days turned into weeks, Emily found herself spending more time with him than required. While checking his vitals or adjusting his IV drip, she began talking to him softly, as though he could hear her. At first, her words were practical updates about his condition. "Your blood pressure is stable today," she'd say, or, "The swelling in your leg has gone down." But gradually, her conversations became more personal. She started sharing bits of her own life, hoping that somehow her voice might reach him. "I'm really tired today," she admitted one evening, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "My sister called earlier, and we got into another argument about my job. She thinks I work too hard, but I love what I do. Do you understand that? Loving something so much that you're willing to give everything for it?" She paused, glancing at his still form. "I guess you can't answer me, huh?" Despite knowing he couldn't respond, Emily continued speaking. It wasn't just about filling the silence. It was about finding comfort in the act of sharing. Over time, her monologues grew deeper. She talked about her childhood dreams of becoming a doctor, only to settle for nursing because of financial constraints. She confessed her fears of failure and loneliness, things she rarely spoke about with anyone else. Each word felt like a release, a weight lifted off her shoulders. What Emily didn't realize was that Daniel Whitmore, the man lying comatose before her, was far from ordinary. Before the accident, he had lived a life shrouded in secrecy. A self-made billionaire, Daniel had built a tech empire from scratch, revolutionizing industries with innovative solutions. Yet fame and fortune had come at a cost. Public appearances drained him, media scrutiny suffocated him, and relationships crumbled under the weight of his demanding schedule. Eventually, he chose to step away from the limelight, retreating into anonymity. The car accident occurred while he was driving late at night, lost in thought after yet another exhausting business meeting. When he was rushed to St. Mary's, no one recognized him. Without identification, he blended into the crowd of patients, just another nameless individual, fighting for survival. For once, Daniel welcomed the anonymity. It allowed him to rest without the burden of expectations. But even in his unconscious state, Daniel's mind wasn't entirely dormant. Though he couldn't open his eyes or move his body, fragments of sound reached him. Among the beeping machines and muffled voices, one voice stood out, Emily's. Her gentle tone cut through the haze, anchoring him to reality. Every word she spoke resonated within him, creating ripples of awareness beneath the surface. He may not have understood everything, but he sensed the sincerity in her voice. And somewhere deep inside, he clung to it. For Emily, caring for Daniel became both a challenge and a refuge. On busy days when the hospital overflowed with patients, she looked forward to her moments with him. In those quiet hours, she could let her guard down, speak freely, and reflect on her own life. Sometimes she wondered if he could hear her. Did he know how much effort went into keeping him comfortable? Did he sense the warmth of her touch when she adjusted his blanket? Or was he trapped in a void, unreachable by anyone? One particularly stressful afternoon, after dealing with a difficult patient and receiving criticism from her supervisor, Emily broke down. Sitting by Daniel's bedside, tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I don't know why I keep doing this. Why do I pour my heart into caring for people who don't even notice? Maybe I'm just wasting my time." She hesitated, then added softly, "But not you. You're different. Even if you can't respond, I feel like you listen. Like you understand." Brushing away her tears, she took a deep breath. "Thank you for being here, Daniel. Even if you never wake up, thank you for giving me someone to talk to." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Unbeknownst to her, they sparked a flicker of activity in Daniel's brain. Somewhere in the depths of his subconscious, a spark ignited, a tiny flame of hope. Though invisible to the outside world, it marked the beginning of a journey toward awakening. And as Emily sat there holding his hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, her words weren't falling on deaf ears. As the days stretched into weeks, Emily continued her routine of caring for Daniel, unaware of the extraordinary truth hidden beneath his unassuming appearance. To her, he was simply a patient, a man who had been entrusted to her care during one of the most vulnerable times in his life. But beyond the hospital walls, whispers began to circulate among the staff about the mysterious John Doe. No family members had come forward to claim him, no friends had visited, and no one seemed to know who he really was. Some nurses speculated that he might have been homeless, while others thought he could be estranged from his loved ones. A few even joked that maybe he was a spy or someone involved in something dangerous, given how little information they had about him. Emily, however, dismissed these theories. She preferred to focus on what mattered most, ensuring Daniel received the best care possible. Still, she couldn't help but wonder about the life he led before the accident. Who was he? Where did he come from? And why did no one seem to miss him? What Emily didn't realize was that Daniel Whitmore wasn't just any ordinary man. Before the crash, he had lived a life far removed from the simplicity of hospital routines. Born into modest circumstances, Daniel had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. His journey to success was nothing short of remarkable. Starting with nothing more than a laptop and a dream, he founded a tech company that revolutionized the way people interacted with technology. From artificial intelligence to cutting-edge software solutions, his innovations touched millions of lives worldwide. Yet for all his achievements, Daniel remained an enigma. He avoided interviews, shunned red carpets, and kept his personal life fiercely private. Over time, public curiosity grew, fueled by rumors of his reclusive nature and eccentric habits. Some called him a genius, others labeled him a recluse. But everyone agreed on one thing: Daniel Whitmore was unlike anyone else. After years of relentless work and constant scrutiny, he decided to step away from the spotlight entirely. He sold off parts of his empire, delegated responsibilities to trusted associates, and retreated into a quiet existence where he could live without the weight of expectations. When the car accident occurred, it severed not only his connection to the outside world but also any trace of his identity. His wallet, phone, and other belongings were destroyed in the wreckage, leaving behind no clues about who he truly was. For the first time in years, Daniel found himself completely unknown, even to those trying to save his life. At St. Mary's Hospital, he became just another patient, indistinguishable from the rest. This anonymity, though accidental, offered him a strange sense of peace. Without titles, wealth, or fame defining him, he existed in a liminal space, free from judgment or obligation. Meanwhile, Emily's bond with Daniel deepened with each passing day. Though he remained unconscious, she felt as though she was getting to know him through her conversations. She often imagined what kind of person he might be, based on the fragments of his appearance. The strong jawline, the calloused hands that hinted at manual labor, the faint scar above his eyebrow that suggested a history of resilience. In her mind, she pieced together a portrait of a man who was both tough and tender, capable yet compassionate. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Emily found herself sitting by Daniel's bedside once again. The hospital was unusually quiet, the dim lights casting soft shadows across the room. Leaning back in her chair, she sighed and said, "You know, Daniel, I think I've figured out a little more about you today." She smiled faintly, glancing at his face. "I bet you're someone who works hard but doesn't like to talk about it. Maybe you're the type of person who prefers action over words. Am I right?" She paused, waiting, as if expecting him to answer before continuing. "And I think you're stubborn, not in a bad way, but in a I'll do things my own way kind of way. You strike me as someone who values independence, even if it means going against the grain sometimes." Her voice softened. "But there's kindness in you too, I can feel it. It's in the way your presence makes me want to be better, to try harder. Does that make sense?" Though Daniel showed no outward signs of hearing her, his subconscious mind was far from inactive. Beneath the surface, his brain processed every syllable, every nuance of her tone. Research has shown that patients in comas can sometimes retain awareness of their surroundings, even if they can't respond physically. For Daniel, Emily's voice became a lifeline, a thread connecting him to the world outside his darkened consciousness. Each word she spoke created ripples within him, stirring memories and emotions long buried under layers of stress and isolation. Over time, Emily noticed subtle changes in Daniel's condition. His vital signs improved slightly, his reflexes became more pronounced, and there were moments when his eyelids fluttered as though he were trying to open them. These small victories filled her with hope, reinforcing her belief that he was still fighting. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that their connection went beyond medical progress. It was as though her words carried a power greater than science could explain, a power rooted in empathy, trust, and human connection. On one occasion, Emily brought a small potted plant to Daniel's room. It was a simple fern, vibrant and green, meant to brighten the sterile environment. Placing it on the windowsill, she explained, "Plants are amazing, aren't they? They grow toward the light no matter how dark things get. I thought you might appreciate having something alive nearby." She chuckled softly. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You just focus on getting better." As she arranged the plant, she added, "You remind me of this fern, you know. Quiet, resilient, determined to survive. Maybe that's why I admire you so much." Her admission caught her off guard, and she quickly changed the subject, redirecting her attention to checking his vitals. But the sentiment lingered, hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. Unbeknownst to Emily, Daniel's mind was slowly piecing together fragments of her voice, her kindness, and her unwavering dedication. Though he couldn't move or speak, he was beginning to recognize patterns in her visits, associating her presence with comfort and safety. Her laughter echoed in his memory, her touch registered as warmth, and her words planted seeds of hope in the soil of his subconscious. Little by little, he began to fight, not just for survival but for the chance to meet the woman who had become his anchor in the storm. For Emily, these moments reinforced her commitment to Daniel's recovery. She poured her heart into caring for him, believing that her efforts weren't in vain. What she didn't know was that her faith was reciprocated in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Somewhere deep inside, Daniel was awakening, not just to consciousness but to the possibility of a future shaped by the woman who refused to give up on him. And as the days turned into weeks, neither of them realized how profoundly their lives were about to change. The nights at St. Mary's Hospital were often quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses making their rounds. For Emily, these late hours had become a sacred time, a moment when the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only her and Daniel in their shared solitude. It was during one such night, under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, that something inside Emily shifted. She wasn't sure what prompted it. Perhaps it was the weight of exhaustion after a long week, or maybe it was the realization that she had grown too attached to someone who might never wake up. Whatever the reason, as she sat by Daniel's side staring at his motionless form, emotions bubbled to the surface, demanding release. She leaned forward in her chair, resting her elbows on her knees and clasping her hands together tightly. Her gaze lingered on his face, the faint stubble along his jawline, the slight curve of his lips that almost looked like the beginnings of a smile. "Daniel," she began softly, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "I don't know if you can hear me. I mean, I keep talking to you like you can, but, well, I'm not really sure anymore." She paused, swallowing hard as tears welled up in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "You've been here for so long now, and I've spent so much time with you. More than I probably should. At first, it was just part of my job. You know, checking your vitals, making sure everything's okay, but then..." Her voice cracked and she hesitated, trying to gather her thoughts. "But then, it started feeling different. Like you weren't just a patient anymore. You became something else." Emily glanced around the room, half expecting someone to walk in and interrupt her confession, but they were alone, cocooned in the stillness of the hospital wing. Gathering her courage, she pressed on. "I think I've fallen in love with you, Daniel. And before you or anyone judges me, let me explain. I know how crazy it sounds. How could I fall in love with someone I barely know? Someone who hasn't even opened his eyes. But it's not about what you've said or done. It's about how you make me feel." Her words spilled out faster now, as though a dam had broken within her. "When I'm with you, I feel safe. Like I can say anything, and it won't matter, because you're not going to judge me. You listen, really listen, in a way no one else ever has. Maybe it's silly, but I feel like you understand me, even though you can't respond. Does that make any sense?" She wiped a tear from her cheek, laughing nervously at herself. "God, I sound ridiculous, don't I? Falling in love with a man in a coma. What kind of story is this?" Her laughter faded into silence as she stared at him, searching for some sign, some flicker of recognition. "But here's the thing. I don't care how absurd it seems, because it's real. These feelings are real. And if you ever wake up, I hope you'll understand why I had to say this, why I couldn't keep it bottled up anymore." For several moments, Emily sat there, her heart pounding in her chest. The room felt heavier somehow, as though her confession had filled it with an invisible energy. She reached out tentatively, placing her hand over his. His skin was warm, though unmoving, and she squeezed gently, as if willing him to respond. When nothing happened, she sighed and pulled back, standing up to leave. "I shouldn't have said all that," she muttered, shaking her head. "It's unprofessional, probably inappropriate too. Forget I said anything, okay? Just get better. That's all I want." With that, she turned off the bedside lamp and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. Unbeknownst to Emily, her heartfelt confession left a lasting impression, not just on her own heart, but on Daniel's subconscious mind as well. Though he remained physically unresponsive, his brain activity subtly increased in response to her words. Buried beneath layers of unconsciousness, fragments of her voice resonated deeply, stirring memories and emotions that had lain dormant since the accident. In the days that followed, small but significant changes began to occur. One morning, as Emily entered Daniel's room to check his vitals, she noticed something unusual. His fingers twitched ever so slightly against the blanket covering him. Startled, she froze in place, unsure if she'd imagined it. Moving closer, she gently called his name. "Daniel, can you hear me?" There was no immediate response, but his eyelids fluttered faintly, as though struggling to open. Her pulse quickened as she pressed the call button for assistance. Within minutes, a team of doctors and nurses arrived, bustling around Daniel's bed with a mix of urgency and excitement. They conducted tests, monitoring his brain activity and reflexes, while Emily stood quietly in the corner, watching anxiously. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Patel, the lead physician, approached her with a cautious smile. "There's definite improvement," he said, His brain activity has increased significantly, and we're seeing signs of responsiveness. This is a very good sign, Emily. Relief washed over her, but it was tinged with apprehension. Could her confession have played a role in his progress? She dismissed the thought almost immediately. It was impossible to know for sure. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that their connection ran deeper than she had realized. Over the next few days, Daniel continued to show signs of awakening. His movements became more pronounced, his reflexes sharper, and his breathing steadier. Each milestone filled Emily with hope, yet also brought a wave of anxiety. What would happen when he finally woke up? Would he remember her words? Would he understand the depth of her feelings? Or worse, would he reject them outright? On the 5th day after the incident, Emily arrived at work with a knot in her stomach. As she pushed open the door to Daniel's room, she froze. He was awake. His eyes, though glassy and unfocused, were open, scanning the ceiling above him. Panic surged through her, and for a moment she considered backing out of the room. But then, as if sensing her presence, his gaze shifted toward her. "Emily," he rasped, his voice hoarse and barely audible. The sound sent shivers down her spine. She rushed to his side, her heart racing. "Daniel, you're awake!" Tears sprang to her eyes as she reached for the call button. "I'll get the doctor right away." Before she could move, Daniel weakly raised a hand, stopping her. "Wait," he whispered, his voice strained but urgent. "Don't go, please." His grip on her wrist was feeble, but it conveyed a desperate need that made her pause. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair beside his bed, her mind reeling. How are you feeling?" she stammered, avoiding his gaze. She braced herself for questions, accusations, anything that might come next, but instead Daniel surprised her. "You saved me," he said simply, his tone laced with gratitude. His eyes locked onto hers, piercing through her defenses. "I heard everything you said. Every word." Emily's breath hitched, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mortified, she tried to deflect his comment. "You must be confused. People in comas sometimes dream or imagine things. It's normal." "No," he interrupted firmly, though still weak. "I remember. Your voice, it kept me going. It gave me a reason to fight." His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. Emily's throat tightened and she struggled to find a response. "I didn't mean to say those things," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you couldn't hear me." Daniel managed a faint smile, his expression softening. "Well, I did, and I'm glad you did. Thank you for being honest, for caring enough to tell me the truth." In that moment, Emily realized that Daniel's awakening wasn't just a medical miracle. It was a turning point for both of them. Her confession, which she had feared might alienate her from him, had instead forged a bond stronger than she could have imagined. As they sat there, locked in a silent understanding, neither of them knew what the future held, but they were ready to face it together. Weeks had passed since Daniel Whitmore's miraculous awakening, and the hospital buzzed with a mix of relief and disbelief. For so long, he had been a silent figure in the ICU, his identity shrouded in mystery and his future uncertain. But now, as he slowly regained strength, the man who had once been referred to as John Doe began to emerge from the shadows. His recovery was nothing short of extraordinary, a testament to both medical expertise and sheer willpower. Yet what truly set this story apart was the bond that had formed between him and Emily Carter, the nurse who had cared for him tirelessly during his darkest hours. Daniel's first few days of consciousness were hazy and disorienting. The world around him felt foreign, blurred by weeks of unconsciousness. Sounds were muffled, light seemed too bright, and movement required immense effort. Despite the confusion, one thing stood out vividly: Emily's voice. It lingered in his mind like an echo, grounding him through the chaos. He remembered her words, her confessions, her laughter, her gentle reassurances, and they became a beacon guiding him back to reality. Her presence had been a constant even when he couldn't respond, and now that he could, he was determined to thank her. One evening, as Emily entered his room to check on him, she froze in surprise. Instead of lying motionless as he had for so many weeks, Daniel was sitting up slightly, his eyes open and fixed on her. His voice was weak and hoarse but unmistakable. "You saved me," he said softly, his gaze steady despite his frailty. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to speak so soon, or at all. Stammering, she replied, I didn't do anything special. I just did my job." But Daniel shook his head faintly, his expression earnest. "No," he insisted, his voice trembling with emotion. "You gave me a reason to fight. You kept me alive when I didn't have the strength to do it myself." His words left Emily speechless. She had always believed in the power of compassion, but hearing it acknowledged so directly was overwhelming. Unsure of how to respond, she busied herself adjusting his pillows and checking his vitals, trying to regain her composure. When she finally looked at him again, she noticed something in his eyes. Gratitude, yes, but also a flicker of vulnerability that made her pause. Before she could retreat into professionalism, Daniel added, "And I heard everything you said, so." Air seemed to still. Emily's cheeks flushed red as memories of her late-night confessions flooded back. She had poured her heart out to him, sharing thoughts and feelings she hadn't even admitted to herself. At the time, she had convinced herself it didn't matter. He was in a coma. He couldn't possibly hear her. But now, faced with the truth, she felt exposed, as though her deepest secrets had been laid bare. I don't know what to say," she stammered, avoiding his gaze. "I thought you wouldn't remember any of that." "I remember every word," Daniel replied, his tone gentle but firm. "And I want you to know, I'm glad you trusted me enough to share those things. It meant more to me than you'll ever realize." Emily wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Part of her wanted to dismiss her words as nonsense spoken in exhaustion, but another part, the part that had grown to care deeply for this man, knew they were true. Still, the weight of the situation pressed down on her. What did this mean for them? Could their connection transcend the boundaries of caregiver and patient? Over the next few days, Daniel continued to recover, growing stronger with each passing hour. As he regained clarity, he began piecing together fragments of his past, or rather, what little of it he chose to reveal. To the outside world, he remained an enigma. But to Emily, he started opening up in small, meaningful ways. He spoke about his love for solitude, his disdain for fame, and his desire to live a life free from pretense. Though he never explicitly mentioned his wealth or achievements, there was an undercurrent of wisdom and experience in his words that hinted at a life far richer than she could imagine. Despite his progress, Daniel struggled with vulnerability. Years of living in isolation had taught him to guard his emotions carefully, and trusting someone new felt like stepping onto shaky ground. Yet with Emily, he found himself wanting to try. There was something about her sincerity, her ability to see beyond surface-level appearances that made him feel safe. He realized that her kindness wasn't performative. It came from a place of genuine empathy, a quality he had rarely encountered before. For Emily, navigating this new dynamic was equally challenging. She had always prided herself on maintaining professional boundaries with her patients, but Daniel was different. Their connection transcended the usual roles, blurring the lines between friendship, gratitude, and something deeper. She couldn't deny the way her heart raced whenever he smiled at her, or the warmth she felt when he thanked her for something as simple as bringing him a glass of water. But she also worried about overstepping, about letting her emotions cloud her judgment. One afternoon, as they sat together in his room, Daniel broached the subject directly. "Emily," he began hesitantly, "I need to tell you something about who I am." She glanced at him curiously, sensing the gravity in his tone. "Okay," she said slowly, bracing herself for whatever revelation was about to come. Taking a deep breath, Daniel explained. "Before the accident, I lived a very different life, a public one. filled with responsibilities and expectations, but I walked away from it because it wasn't who I wanted to be. I came here, to this city, to start over, to find peace. And then, the accident happened. He paused, searching, her face for a reaction. When she remained silent, he continued, "What I'm trying to say is, I'm not just some random guy. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and I've done things most people only dream of. But none of that matters anymore. What matters is here, right now, with you." Emily stared at him, processing his words. She had suspected there was more to him than met the eye, but hearing it confirmed was surreal. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because I owe you honesty," he replied. "You've been honest with me from the start, even when you thought I couldn't hear you. I want to return that trust." His admission left Emily reeling. On one hand, she felt honored that he trusted her enough to share such personal information. On the other hand, she couldn't help but wonder how this revelation would affect their relationship. Would knowing his true identity change the way she saw him? Or would it deepen the bond they had already formed? As the days turned into weeks, Daniel's health continued to improve, allowing him more freedom to move and interact with the world around him. With each step forward, he grew more determined to express his gratitude, not just to Emily, but to everyone at St. Mary's who had played a role in his recovery. He wrote heartfelt notes to the doctors and nurses, thanking them for their dedication and care. He even arranged for a generous donation to the hospital, ensuring that the staff would have access to better resources in the future. Yet despite his outward generosity, Daniel's focus remained squarely on Emily. He sought her out whenever possible, eager to learn more about her life and interests. They talked about everything, from books and music to childhood memories and dreams for the future. Each conversation brought them closer, revealing layers of compatibility that neither had anticipated. Still, doubts lingered beneath the surface. Daniel worried that Emily's feelings might stem from pity or obligation, rather than genuine affection. After all, she had spent months caring for him when he was at his weakest. How could he be sure that her emotions weren't tied to that experience? Meanwhile, Emily wrestled with her own uncertainties. Could she truly love someone whose life was so vastly different from hers? Would they ever be able to bridge the gap between their worlds? Despite these questions, their connection continued to grow. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, miscommunication, and fear, but it was real. And as they navigated the complexities of their newfound relationship, they discovered something profound. Love isn't about finding someone exactly like you. It's about embracing differences, learning from each other, and choosing to walk forward together no matter how uncertain the path may seem. For Emily and Daniel, the journey was just beginning. But as they stood on the precipice of something extraordinary, they knew one thing for certain. Their lives had been forever changed by the power of human connection, a connection that had blossomed in the unlikeliest of places. As Daniel Whitmore's recovery progressed, the hospital staff couldn't help but notice the transformation in him. Gone was the silent, enigmatic figure who had lain motionless for months. In his place stood a man with a quiet confidence and an unmistakable warmth, qualities that seemed to radiate even brighter whenever Emily Carter was near. The bond between them had grown undeniable, sparking curiosity among their colleagues. Yet what no one realized was the depth of the connection they shared, a connection rooted not just in gratitude or admiration, but in vulnerability and trust. Daniel knew he couldn't keep his identity hidden forever. Though he had chosen anonymity during his recovery, the truth about his wealth and status would eventually come to light. He didn't want Emily to hear it from anyone else. She deserved honesty, straight from him. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital garden, a quiet space where patients often went to escape the sterile environment, he decided it was time to reveal everything. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "There's something I need to tell you. Something important." She looked at him curiously, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Daniel explained, "Before the accident, I lived a very different life. My name is Daniel Whitmore and, well, let's just say I've achieved a level of success most people only dream of." He paused, searching her face for a reaction. When she remained silent, he continued, "I built a tech company from scratch, one that became a global empire, but fame and fortune came at a cost. They isolated me, suffocated me, so I stepped away, hoping to find peace. And then, the accident happened." Emily listened intently, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, realization dawned on her. She had heard the name Daniel Whitmore before, in news articles, business magazines, and late-night talk shows. He was a household name, though his reclusive nature had turned him into something of a myth. A billionaire who disappeared without explanation? It sounded like the plot of a movie. Yet here he was, sitting beside her, speaking with such humility that it was hard to reconcile him with the larger-than-life persona she had imagined. "You're serious?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," he replied, nodding. "And I understand if this changes things for you, if it makes you uncomfortable or unsure about us." Her response surprised him. Instead of pulling away, she smiled softly and said, "It doesn't change how I feel about you, Daniel. What matters to me isn't your money or your accomplishments. It's who you are, the person I've gotten to know these past few weeks. That hasn't changed." Relief washed over him, followed by a wave of emotion he hadn't expected. For years he had guarded himself against forming close relationships, fearing judgment or ulterior motives. But Emily's acceptance of him, for who he truly was, felt like a gift he hadn't known he needed. With his identity revealed, Daniel found himself reflecting on how much his perspective had shifted since waking up. Before the accident, his life had been defined by ambition and achievement. Success was measured in numbers, profits, market shares, innovations. But now, surrounded by the simplicity of human connection, he saw how hollow those metrics felt in comparison to the joy of sharing laughter, stories, and moments with someone who genuinely cared. Inspired by Emily's compassion and dedication, Daniel proposed an idea that would honor both her profession and their shared values. "I want to do something meaningful," he told her one day. "Something that gives back to the people who saved my life and others like them." He went on to explain his vision: a foundation dedicated to improving healthcare access, particularly for underserved communities. The organization would provide funding for medical equipment, training programs for nurses, and scholarships for aspiring healthcare professionals. Most importantly, it would bear Emily's name, a tribute to the woman whose kindness had sparked his second chance at life. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I was just doing my job." "It's not just about your job," Daniel countered gently. "It's about who you are. You reminded me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the impact we have on others' lives. This foundation will be a way to carry that message forward." The announcement of the foundation sent ripples through the hospital community. Staff members were moved by Daniel's generosity, while patients expressed gratitude for the hope it represented. Reporters swarmed outside St. Mary's, eager to capture the story of the mysterious billionaire patient who had turned his near-death experience into a mission of giving back. Yet amidst the chaos, Daniel and Emily remained focused on what truly mattered: their relationship. Despite his newfound openness, Daniel still struggled with vulnerability. Years of living in isolation had conditioned him to suppress his emotions, and trusting someone completely felt like stepping onto uncertain ground. He worried that Emily's feelings might stem from obligation or pity, rather than genuine affection. After all, she had spent months caring for him when he was at his weakest. How could he be sure that her heart wasn't tied to that role? For Emily, the doubt stemmed from a different place. Could she truly love someone whose life was so vastly different from hers? Would they ever be able to bridge the gap between their worlds? She admired Daniel deeply, not just for his wealth or achievements, but for his humility, sincerity, and willingness to grow. Still, She couldn't ignore the practical challenges that lay ahead. His fame brought scrutiny, expectations, and responsibilities she wasn't sure she was ready to handle. One evening, as they walked through the hospital garden under the soft glow of string lights, Daniel voiced his fears. "I'm scared, Emily," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Scared that I'll never be enough for you, that my past will always stand between us." Her response was immediate and heartfelt. "Daniel, you already are enough. None of this, the money, the fame, the foundation, matters to me. What matters is how you make me feel. Safe, valued, understood. Those are things no amount of wealth can buy." Her words eased his worries, but they also deepened his resolve to prove himself worthy of her love. Over the following weeks, he made a conscious effort to embrace vulnerability, sharing more about his struggles and insecurities. In turn, Emily opened up about her own fears, dreams, and aspirations. Their conversations became a safe space where they could be fully themselves, free from judgment or pretense. Through these exchanges, they discovered that their differences weren't barriers. They were opportunities for growth. Daniel marveled at Emily's resilience, her ability to find strength in adversity. Emily admired Daniel's determination to use his resources for good, his desire to leave a lasting legacy beyond material wealth. Together, they learned to navigate the complexities of their relationship, finding beauty in the contrasts that made them unique. As the days turned into months, Daniel's health improved significantly. With each milestone reached, he grew more confident in his ability to reclaim his independence. Yet he never forgot the debt he owed to Emily, to her care, her compassion, and her unwavering belief in him. Determined to express his gratitude in a way that matched the magnitude of his feelings, he began planning a gesture that would symbolize the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. One crisp autumn evening, Daniel invited Emily to join him for a walk in the same garden where they had spent countless hours talking and laughing. The air was cool, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. As they strolled along the winding path, Daniel stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you've given me so much: hope, purpose, a reason to live. I don't know how to repay you for that, but I do know one thing. I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, growing with you, and loving you." With that, he knelt down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring, its design understated yet timeless. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes glistening with tears. Emily's hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, overwhelmed by the moment. For a brief second, she thought about all the challenges they might face, the public scrutiny, the lifestyle adjustments, the sacrifices required to build a life together. But then she looked into Daniel's eyes and saw the same sincerity and devotion she had fallen in love with. All her doubts melted away, replaced by a certainty that this was where she belonged. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, the world around them seemed to fade away. In that instant, nothing else mattered. Not his wealth, not her career, not the obstacles they might encounter in the future. What mattered was the promise they had made to each other, to face life's uncertainties side by side, with love as their guiding light. Their engagement marked the start of a new journey, one filled with challenges, triumphs, and endless possibilities. For Emily and Daniel, it was proof that love transcends boundaries, defies expectations, and transforms lives in ways no one can predict. And as they stood there, hand in hand, they knew they were ready to take on whatever the future held, together. The news of Emily and Daniel's engagement spread quickly, first within the walls of St. Mary's Hospital and then beyond. Reporters camped outside the hospital gates, eager to capture every detail of the unlikely love story between a nurse and a billionaire. Social media buzzed with speculation, admiration, and even some skepticism. Yet amidst the whirlwind of attention, Emily and Daniel remained steadfast in their commitment to each other. They knew that their relationship was built on something far deeper than fame or fortune. It was rooted in trust, vulnerability, and a shared vision for the future. Daniel had always been wary of publicity, but this time, he decided to embrace it, not for himself, but for the foundation they were creating together. He saw an opportunity to use his platform to shine a light on issues close to Emily's heart: healthcare access, patient care, and the tireless work of nurses who often went unrecognized. Together, they organized a press conference at the hospital, inviting journalists, community leaders, and staff members to celebrate the launch of the Emily Carter Foundation. Standing side by side on the stage, Daniel addressed the crowd with a sincerity that silenced even the most cynical reporters. "When I woke up from my coma," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I realized how fragile life is, and how much we owe to those who dedicate themselves to saving others. This foundation is my way of saying thank you, not just to Emily but to everyone in the healthcare profession who puts their heart into their work every single day." Emily followed him, her hands trembling slightly as she held the microphone. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she admitted, her voice soft but clear. "All I've ever wanted is to make a difference in people's lives, one patient at a time. But now, thanks to Daniel's generosity, we have the chance to make a difference on a much larger scale. This foundation isn't about me. It's about all of us working together to create a better future for patients and caregivers alike." The audience erupted in applause, moved not only by their words, but by the authenticity of their partnership. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to feel proud, not of his wealth or achievements, but of the legacy he and Emily were building together. It wasn't about titles or recognition. It was about impact, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserved access to quality care. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the wedding became a joyful distraction from the chaos of public scrutiny. Emily insisted on keeping things simple, despite Daniel's insistence that she deserved nothing less than perfection. "I don't need a grand ceremony," she told him one evening as they sat planning the details. "What matters to me is that we're surrounded by the people we love, and that we start our life together on our own terms." Daniel smiled, touched by her humility. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," he promised. "A celebration that reflects who we are, not what the world expects." True to their word, the wedding took place in a secluded garden tucked away from prying eyes. The venue was adorned with twinkling fairy lights, fresh flowers, and handmade decorations crafted by friends and family. Guests included hospital staff, close friends, and a few of Daniel's trusted associates, people who had earned their place in their lives through kindness and loyalty rather than status or influence. It was a gathering that embodied the essence of their relationship: warm, intimate, and genuine. As Emily walked down the aisle in a simple yet elegant gown, her arm linked with her sister's, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. Just months ago, she had been sitting by Daniel's bedside, pouring her heart out to a man she thought might never wake up. Now here she was, about to pledge her life to him in front of the people who mattered most. Her eyes met Daniel's, and she saw the same wonder reflected in his gaze. The ceremony was brief but deeply meaningful, filled with heartfelt vows and laughter that brought tears to everyone's eyes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel pulled Emily into a tender kiss, sealing their promise to stand by each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. As they turned to face their guests, cheers erupted, echoing through the garden like music. After the ceremony, the newlyweds danced under the stars, surrounded by the glow of lanterns and the hum of conversation. Friends and colleagues mingled freely, sharing stories and celebrating the union of two worlds that had collided in the most unexpected way. Nurses joked about how Emily had landed herself a billionaire, while Daniel's business partners marveled at the woman who had captured his heart. Through it all, Emily and Daniel remained at the center, radiating happiness and gratitude. Yet their journey was far from over. In the months that followed, they threw themselves into the work of the foundation, traveling to underserved communities, meeting with healthcare professionals, and advocating for policies that prioritized patient care. Together, they proved that true success wasn't measured in dollars or accolades. It was measured in the lives they touched and the change they inspired. For Emily, The transition from nurse to co-founder of a global foundation was both challenging and rewarding. She continued to work part-time at St. Mary's, unwilling to abandon the role that had defined her for so many years. At the same time, she embraced her new responsibilities, using her experiences to inform the foundation's initiatives. Whether she was speaking at conferences or visiting hospitals in remote areas, she carried the same warmth and compassion that had endeared her to patients and colleagues alike. Daniel, too, underwent a transformation. Gone was the reclusive billionaire, who had once shunned the spotlight. In its place stood a man determined to use his resources for good, guided by the values Emily had instilled in him. He learned to listen more, speak less, and approach problems with empathy rather than logic alone. Together, they complemented each other perfectly, balancing strengths and weaknesses in a way that made them unstoppable. Their marriage wasn't without its challenges. Adjusting to life as a high-profile couple required compromise and patience. There were moments when Emily felt overwhelmed by the expectations placed on her as Daniel's wife, and times when Daniel worried that he would never be enough for her. But through it all, they leaned on the foundation of trust and communication they had built during their courtship. They reminded themselves daily why they had chosen each other, not for convenience or circumstance, but because they believed in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. 1 year after their wedding, Daniel surprised Emily with a trip to the place where it had all begun, St. Mary's Hospital. Walking hand in hand through the familiar corridors, they paused outside the ICU room where Daniel had lain unconscious for so long. Standing there, they reflected on the journey that had brought them together, a journey marked by courage, faith, and an unwavering belief in second chances. "You know," Daniel said softly, wrapping an arm around Emily's shoulders, "if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here today. Not just physically, but emotionally. You taught me how to live again." Emily smiled, leaning into his embrace. "And you taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, even when it scares you." As they stood there, surrounded by the echoes of their past, they knew they had created something extraordinary. Their love story wasn't just about two people finding each other. It was about the ripple effect of kindness, the transformative power of connection, and the reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles happen when we least expect them. Together, Emily and Daniel stepped out into the bright sunlight, ready to face whatever the future held. Together.